Hurricane Andrew.
Hurricane Sandy.
Hurricane Harvey barreling into the Texas coastline.
These names elicit images of fierce wind and destruction due to the deadly hurricanes they're synonymous with.
So how do storms that claim hundreds of lives and destroy entire communities get their names?
It was better to name the tropical cyclones. It was an easier way to raise the public awareness about the potential danger.
The World Meteorological Organization oversees 9 agencies that represent storm basins around the world, each with their own slightly different method of identifying names. In the Western Pacific, names submitted by 14 different Asian nations to Japan's weather agency can include plants, animals, and even mythological beings. Storms from the Central Pacific Hurricane Center in Honolulu take on a decidedly Hawaiian identity. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Pacific and Atlantic basins, proposed names generally reflect the English, French, and Hispanic countries that dominate the region.
For Atlantic, for example, you have 6 lists. So the one that is used in 2018 will be used again in 2024.
Unless a storm, such as Hurricane Katrina, the costliest storm in history, is so deadly, the future use of its name on a different storm would be deemed inappropriate. But to truly understand how powerful and deadly storms are named today, we have to go back centuries. Early storm watchers rarely named tropical cyclones in real time and used an abundance of methods to designate storms. One of the earliest records of cyclones being named came in the 13th century, following a pair of failed Mongol invasions in Japan.
In the West Indies, hurricanes were traditionally named after the saint day on which they occurred.
An 1825 cyclone that slammed Puerto Rico on the day that honors the Mother of the Virgin Mary was naturally called Santa Ana. But cataloging hurricanes this way could also lead to confusion, as the island found out in 1928 when it had to call a hurricane San Felipe II or San Felipe II because another storm had hit on the same day 52 years earlier.
Furthermore, weather spotters in different geographic locations could apply different names to the same storm.
For instance, San Felipe II, one of the deadliest storms in recorded history, is better known by its American name, Okeechobee Hurricane. The first person credited with using proper names to identify storms was Australian meteorologist Clement Wragg.
In about 1903, his weather bureau was shut down and the practice went into retirement.
The slow process to find commonality in naming hurricanes began to change as the U.S. entered the Second World War and increased military operations in the Pacific.
In 1944, there were some Air Force meteorologists based on Saipan. During World War II, they revived the idea. They began naming typhoons after their wives.
The military's phonetic alphabet would remain the standard for several years, particularly after the U.S. Weather Bureau in Miami adopted it to provide clarity during a hectic 1950 hurricane season that saw 3 simultaneous cyclones. But a change to the International Phonetic Alphabet and confusion on which to use, the National Hurricane Center officially adopted female names to identify tropical storms and hurricanes. Women's rights activists campaigned against the practice, including activist Roxy Bolton, proposing replacing the word hurricane with himicane. The Australian government, who had been the ire of Clement Wragg, marked International Women's Year in 1975 by ordering its Bureau of Meteorology to use both male and female names. Facing mounting pressure, the National Hurricane Center followed suit, adopting the same practice in 1979, forever changing the way we look at the world's fiercest storms.